Hey everyone, I'm Natalie Bencivenga, and welcome to a very special 5 Minutes with. I am with my friend Dr. Juliana Hauser, who is a couples therapist. And I met her a few months ago working with another one of my friends, Dr. Vonda Wright, and we thought, oh my gosh, we should definitely chit chat and share it with everyone because she is wild, incredible, amazing. You have to check out her page, but I'll let her introduce herself a little bit. So, how are you, Dr. Hauser?
I'm so excited to be talking with you. I think actually I texted you before our event was done, and so we've got to talk. I was so thrilled to meet you. Today's a great day. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the honor is all of mine. Trust me, I'm so excited to have you on the show. And one of the things that I really loved when I got to meet you and listen to you talk, and I've been following you on social media, is I love the progressive lens in which you try to capture intimate therapy and couples counseling and relationship counseling, because I think it's really important on how we actually frame a topic. So, can you share with everyone how your journey started and why you decided to look at therapy with couples through that lens?
Yes, it's funny because people are surprised when I say I started off as a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yes,
I didn't know that's great.
so quite a shift for me. But what I found is that I just really love listening to people's stories. That people's stories matters to me, whether they were 5 years old or 80. And I discovered that the ABCs weren't as interesting to me as looking at someone's emotional growth. And then as my education and internships grew, I started finding that I was always drawn towards something that had to do with sexuality and something to do with either like sexual assault prevention or expanding someone's view of sexuality. When I got my doctorate, I had my first sexuality class. My professor took me aside and she's like, "You're different. You sit up more, you're listening more. I think this may be your interest and your niche." And she was right. It wasn't an easy choice actually, because when you are in the world of sexual education, it comes with you have to have a thick skin. But what I found was that people were so hungry to understand their sexual stories and their sexual journey, and really were, even if the word didn't resonate, they're desperate to have better sex education. And so it became a mission of mine to have a more involved sex education available to people.
No, I think that's really important that you touched on that, because I think we're out of touch collectively and individually with ourselves, with our own bodies, and sexuality, our sexual selves is such a core part of the human experience. And we so often try to negate it or diminish it. And so when you're talking to people that are coming in for the first time, do you feel like your job is to help them empower themselves, or do you feel that that word is completely overused and doesn't even mean anything anymore?
Yeah, I have a bit of a twitch sometimes with the word empowerment, but it's pivotal.
Yeah.
For me, agency resonates a whole lot more. And that begins with my first research that I was really interested in what makes one person, if you had two people with the same sexual details and journey, what makes one person feel good and satisfied and fulfilled with that journey, and the other one devastated and shame-filled. And after many, many years of asking questions, I found out it really was about choice, and not even just within the world of assault, but really just having the ability to make your own decisions and to know what your wants and needs are, which to me is part of the definition of agency. For those who have the luck of having good sex education or models around you that promote your decision making and ability to even ask the questions, what do I want, and then wait to hear what the answer is, they're the lucky ones. But most of us haven't been given that in our lives. So when I look at the process of empowerment, that is part of it. You have to feel empowered to have your own voice and to even do your self-reflection. For me, I actually consider sexuality like the final frontier of self-development. So empowerment works inside of that. You have to be empowered in order to have the bravery to ask those questions. But to me, the difference between empowerment and agency is that empowerment is really an individual process. And that's wonderful. And you have to have an individual experience, but you have to have it collectively in a community, or it falls flat, which is, so for those of us who've had those moments of feeling empowered and we have come to this new dynamic in ourselves, sometimes we look around like, well, what, no one else, or like, where does this fit into other people's lives? So the concept of agency adds knowing all of that in relation to somebody else, and knowing how to stand on your own and know who you are and what you need and want next to somebody else and their agency who know themselves and knows what they needs and wants. Sometimes that works great. And sometimes that really aligns. And a lot of times it doesn't. We have different needs and our agencies have different reflections. And that's what we see a lot happening in our society in the past couple of years too.
Yeah, that's a really great way of looking at both of those spaces. And so when I heard you talk about education, and I just want to touch on this briefly, because I know this could be like it could be a conference in of itself on sex education in this country. But when I hear that, do you think that much has changed with education around sexuality over the last, let's say, 50 years? Because I feel like, having grown up, I'm aging myself here, but I'm 37. And when I look at how sex ed was when we were coming up, and I hear what's going on, and I used to be a social worker, so I was in schools a lot a few years back, and seeing, like, I'm like, I thought we were going to be making bigger strides than this. And I feel like in a way it's getting worse. Do you think there's just this fear from adults for children to have that agency over their own selves? And why do you think we're afraid of that collectively?
Well, and it's a generational problem too, that so often people will come to me wanting to help their kids, but it's a dual process. I have to help them with the terminology and the word and support for helping raise their kids to be sexually competent. But we have to work with the adults too, because so few of us were ever properly educated. And if we were, it was fear-based. It was, don't do this and you're wrong and bad, certainly not pleasure-based, and absolutely not normalizing it. So if we weren't given that experience or lucked out with a group of friends or people in your life that help you normalize it, then why do we think we're going to be able to do that for each other? And then we have a government that isn't supporting that either and putting funding towards it and really restricting access to information. Of course, we haven't made as much stride as we could be. I do think, though, privately, I think that we are making strides more than we are publicly, and that there's a grassroots effort that is definitely more evolved. But gosh, do we need to catch up publicly with it?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think too, what's been really interesting to see the last couple of years, especially in particular on Instagram, is just to see how many sex positive therapists and social workers and people are trying to start these dialogues. And of course, it's not always perfect, but I think just having that information out there or talking about things in a way that's mitigating and reducing shame is really important, because at least that gives us somewhere to sort of start. And so when people come to you as a couple, and let's say, if it's a heterosexual couple or any couple actually, because everybody's living in this framework of the patriarchy in this country, in this heteronormative structure, as well as this white cisgender structure. How do you work through that with people? Because they're coming in with a certain mindset of, this is how this world works. And do you try to get them to look at things from a different lens? And how challenging is that for you?
Because oftentimes when a couple or even individual is coming to me, one of the first thing I have to do is we have to backtrack to teach the concept of agency, because we're not given that. Right. So once they understand that, how do you make decisions on your own? How do you decide what's right for you and what isn't right for you? That's the foundation. And it's exciting once you get there. And then if you're in a couple, figuring out how to do that with a couple, that is beautiful for me. And that does fight the patriarchal way that things have been set up and how relationships have been formed in so many ways. When that happens, all I see is expansion. And it's interesting when I am working with those who identify as male, I often those who identify as male are the ones who bring their partner to therapy with me. They're the one leading it, which already is a great sign that they're interested in wanting to grow and have a self-reflection. What I have found is that there still is such a shame associated with wanting to have your sexual self and life better. And I hope that changes. And I think that will make an enormous difference in the patriarchal system too.
Dr. Hauser, I could go on and on with you, I think, for hours. And the good thing is we're actually going to be reconnecting in a couple of weeks on your Instagram. So I can't wait for sort of part 2 to chat with you further on all of these incredible topics. I hope you'll come back and join me for a second 5 minutes with down the road, because I just loved hearing your perspective, and I just want to learn more. So thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thank you so much for having me and for introducing this topic to your audience too. It means a lot. Big fan of yours.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you.